時母上昔に食べた肉じゃがのあの味が忘れられないのです。丸描いた地球、じっと見た地球、ひょっとして地球にほっと蒸します。ああ一つで見える素晴らしい世界、白米は最高だ、
Tulipomania, a tulip in history. How about a glass of some root beer? Your finest vintage.
Oh, a high roller. Where'd all that money come from?
Oh, just a little business dealing with tulips. The first tulips originated in the snowy mountains, like the Himalayas and the Tian Shan. They were hardy, compact, and short, and they were only a shade of bloody red. The Turks were the first to cultivate them in gardens. Suleiman had the Turks cultivate tulips for the first time, and soon the Ottoman Empire became the home of the tulip. It was considered the most holy flower in Islam, that there would be gardens of tulips after death. The Turks ended up accidentally breeding new types of tulips. They were named the Istanbul tulips. The Istanbul tulips had long petals and were colored vermilion or sulfur. The Ottomans embroidered their clothes with tulip patterns and even made talismans with tulip designs in offering to the heavens. It's hard to say when the first tulips entered into Europe, but a botanist named Carolus Clusius knew a friend who knew a guy who accidentally received some bulbs in an import of Istanbul cloth. He used the tulips in his own garden and tended them in others' gardens. Soon he received an invitation to work the gardens of the Emperor Maximilian II. Once the emperor died and was replaced with the Catholic emperor, Clusius was dismissed. After 17 years he accepted an offer to go to the University of Leiden, at which time he was over 60 years old. He quickly started making gardens upon arrival within half a year, greatly contrasted to his previous gardens with the emperor, which took several years. He wrote Rariorum Plantarum Historia, which had the first classifications of the different types of tulips. Offsets, or outgrowths from a tulip, were used to grow tulips more quickly than with tulip seeds. A virus infected certain tulips and caused the offsets to break, making them grow even more beautiful tulips, and this made infected tulips more popular. After refusing numerous offers, people stole Clusius's broken tulips from his gardens. The stolen tulips were spread all over Europe, increasing the interest in tulips.
Tulips were still very limited, so only very rich people could possess them in luxury. Wealthy men started to buy the flowers of the tulip to give to their loved ones as accessories for high prices, but not the bulbs which could grow new tulips. Tulips became more all-around hardy and could easily grow in poor soil. Soon even novices could grow tulips with ease. Since all tulip bulbs looked alike, tulip merchants sold cheap common types of tulips as if they were rare breeds. All sorts of people competed amongst themselves to breed even more beautiful species of tulips, and thanks to the masses of people breeding tulips, they became less rare and were soon abundant all over Europe.
Poor people were attracted to the idea of growing tulips and selling them for more money than they make in a year. The poor gambled almost everything they had to obtain tulip bulbs to grow. The tulip mania began in the 1630s. The tulip mania happened at the same time that the bubonic plague spread through Europe. Prices rose as much as tenfold for rare tulips. Tulips were sold for as much money that could have bought a whole house. Soon the people who bought tulips were more concerned with how much money they could make and less on their beauty. Those short on money traded their clothes, furniture, or other possessions for bulbs. For a short time tulips were sold by how much they weighed. Tulips were weighed in aces. 1 ace was equal to 1/20th of a gram. Tulip sales did not affect the stock market at all, since tulip trading was independent among those involved. Tulips were sold regularly in the backrooms of taverns, in auctions, or at colleges. One owner of a tavern and hotel, Walter Winkel, had a wife and 7 children. When his wife died suddenly, he had to rely on his immense collection of rare tulips to support his family. Unfortunately, right after his tulips sprouted, he died, leaving his 7 children in an orphanage. Once the children were old enough to leave the orphanage, they sold their father's collection of tulips at auction. Luckily, they sold the tulips at the pristine moment that the tulip mania was at its highest. The 7 children earned enough money from that one auction that could have evenly supported each of them for a lifetime. The following month, the tulip mania suddenly crashed. No one wanted to buy tulips at any of the usual prices. There was no steady decrease in tulip sales over time. It was quick and unexpected. Those who had tons of tulips, thinking they could live easy, suddenly went into debt. The only people buying tulips now were rich people whose wealth didn't depend on the selling of tulips for a living. Now all tulips, common or rare, only sold for 1/100th of its original price before the crash. The news spread to all nearby towns and the towns near them, and over the course of a week or two the tulip trade was dead. With no one wanting to buy tulips, people didn't want to finish paying off the debts that they owed for tulips they bought months ago. Everyone accused the florists that the bulbs they bought were damaged and demanded refunds. Eventually the government was called in to make a solution. Anyone that was legally bound to their transactions had to pay off their debt through court. From the end of a mania in the Netherlands, to a new mania in the Ottoman Empire. The sultans of the Ottoman Empire still adored tulips and had gardens filled with many species, most exported from Europe. Lavish tulip festivals were held in the sultan's palace, usually just to seduce women. Servants found themselves able to reach high places in office by offering rare and beautiful tulip species. Eventually, unrest was stirred in the townspeople as taxation for the gardens and the occurring war caused them to blame the sultans, and riots were started.
Back in the Dutch Netherlands, tulips were still being sold, but only for pure aesthetics. Tulips in the Netherlands were now mostly exported to the Ottoman Empire and everywhere else in Europe. Tulips were soon second-rate to other flowers that caused their own miniature manias. But the mini manias paled in comparison to the tulip mania, for other flowers were harder to grow than the hardy tulips that grew in poor soil. Now in present day, farmers have revolutionized the tulip species. All tulips that were affected by the mosaic virus from hundreds of years ago had died out completely, so through crossbreeding tulips without the virus, the form of the tulip was radically changed. The tulip continues, even now, to dazzle people with its flaming colors and infinite beauty.
ゆりかごが一つあった。ゆりかごに一つがあった。一つは二つになった。ゆりかごは一つ霧に紛れて、星一つ墓場で揺れて消えてくよ。